Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Cloud Buddhist Monastery for our evening Dhamma program. Thanks for standing by while we worked out a few technical difficulties here. I am Bhikkhu Santi, and I will be leading our program this evening, along with all of our programs this week. If this is your first program of the week, you may know that we are on a deep retreat here at Empty Cloud with the entire community, both the lay residents and the monks and monastics, enjoying the still of winter with 2 months of silent retreat. And during this time, the monks are taking turns leading the week's programs. So this evening I'll be single-handing the technical side of things. So if there's any fumbling, I ask your forgiveness in advance. So the evening's program will begin as usual with maybe a little bit less meditation than usual because we are starting a few minutes late. So about 20-25 minutes of guided meditation. And then we'll have a Dhamma talk for about half an hour, followed by any questions that might be alive for you listening to the talk or that come out of the meditation, or Dhamma-related questions that have been in your mind. So let's begin with the guided meditation. If you have a meditation practice of your own and you wish simply to sit and quietly meditate in the community of practitioners who have gathered here tonight, by all means, please feel free. If you'd like to try something a little new, perhaps germane to the talk that I'll be giving afterwards, I invite you and encourage you to tune into my instructions and follow along. To begin, please take a comfortable posture, seated, with a vertical, upright upper body. Seated on the floor or in a chair is completely fine. The intention with the upright posture is simply awakeness, to be in a comfortable position which you associate with being awake and clear. Some traditions place great emphasis on the precision of the sitting posture. And this is why we form associations with our posture. And the more we meditate in a particular posture, the more easily we can tune in to our meditation in that posture. So upright, but not rigid. Imagine a string tied to the top of your head, extending upward, that you're just very, very gently aligned to, hanging from, rather than attempting to sit with a rigid, straight ramrod kind of upright back. The idea is to use the least muscular effort to remain beautifully vertical. Relax whatever you can relax and still remain beautifully vertical. Head over the neck over the rest of the spine. And as you come into that alignment, relax what you can. We'll begin with a scan of the body. Take a nice deep breath as you settle into the body. What I'd like to invite you to do during this body scan is something a little different than you may have done in the past. Namely, just notice the part of the body that I point to. Don't try to do anything to it. Don't relax. Don't explore. Just notice what's there. What you can feel to any of the sense doors. Mainly feeling, but there may be some imaginings that come to mind with it or subtle imagings of it. But mainly just noticing what's there. Whether there's anything there or not, you may not feel the entire body part that I name. That's fine. Just notice what's there. All I'm going to do is name the body area and just notice. The top of the head, back of the head, the sides of the head and the ears, the face, the neck, the back of the neck, sides of the neck, front of the neck, and now the whole head. The shoulders, both sides. The upper arms, both arms. The biceps and back of the arms. The elbows. The forearms, front and back. The wrists. The back of the hands. Fronts of the hands. The fingers. The fingertips. The upper chest, collarbone, just below the shoulders. And the chest, the upper chest, all around the lungs. The middle of the chest, in the front. Where the breath rises and falls. All around the sternum. The diaphragm. And the belly. And the whole upper body, chest and belly cavity. And the pelvis. The upper back and shoulder blades. The middle back, middle spine. The lower back. the whole column of the spine. The seat. The backs of the upper legs and the fronts of the upper legs. The knees, front and back. The lower legs, front and back. The ankles. The tops of the feet. The heels. Bottoms of the feet. The soles. And the toes. Feel the whole body. Rest content with whatever you feel of the whole body. And the breath. Let the attention rest on the breath without directing it, wherever it lands in the breath. It's okay if it shifts a bit. Notice that and accept that. For the rest of the meditation period, about 10 more minutes, we will very simply sit, resting our attention on the breath. If your attention wanders, notice your attention wandering. Notice how that affects your attention wandering. And from that place of awareness, come back to the breath. For the last few minutes, about 5 or 6 more minutes, let's go a little deeper with the noticing. Noticing the breath. If you're staying with the breath, wonderful. Deepen into the senses. If the mind wanders, and you notice the mind wandering, inquire, why is the mind wandering? And to answer this question, I'm not suggesting looking for a reason or doing some analysis or forming words, but simply feeling into the question, what does this thought or feeling or image want? What does it want? Why is it there? What's it after? What is its purpose? Is there an intention there? All of this simply at the feeling level. And as you notice that, you feel it, let it go, come back to the breath. we'll slowly come out of meditation, letting the breath deepen. You don't need to open your eyes right away. As the moment feels right, you can slowly open your eyes. Feel free to stretch, release, make any small movements you'd like to do when you're coming out of meditation. It's okay to take a moment to stand up and stretch. We'll start our Dhamma talk in just a moment or two. Well, for those of us just joining, I'll welcome you and welcome everyone else once again to the more interactive part of our evening together. For those just joining, I'm Bhikkhu Santi. I'm going to speak now for half an hour or so, and if you have any questions that come up, please feel free to type them into the live chat. Be sure to save plenty of time to speak to them. We'll begin our evening of Dhamma reflection with the traditional homage to the Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namassami. Just at the end of that meditation, I had a memory come to me of a question that came up for me very, very, very early in my taking up of the Dhamma and of Dhamma practice. It was on the very first retreat I attended. This was a retreat at Insight Meditation Society. Maybe some of you are familiar with it. That's how I got my start in on the path of the Buddha's Dhamma specifically. I've been doing different kinds of meditation on and off throughout my life, but that retreat really, really got me going. And the question that came up, I'm realizing I associate with the particular meditation instructions that I just gave you. And the question was one that has animated my practice for a very long time now. It's a spiritual question, I think, and one that has been fruitful for me. The question was, what moves the mind? Simply put, what moves the mind? Why these thoughts, these feelings? What's moving it forward? The answer that was given to me at that time was really helpful, but I'm going to hold off on it for now, and instead, I'll share it later. If I forget and you want to know, you can ask me in the live chat. Hopefully I won't forget. But the question revolves around a central aspect of mind that, for some reason, we don't often talk about that directly in meditation and in talking about meditation and thinking about the Dhamma. And it could just be a question of language, but it bears, I think, a lot of reflection. And that is the concept or topic of attention. We talk about mindfulness, we talk about consciousness, we talk about awareness, perception, feeling. There are many different mental faculties that closely relate to one another, that overlap, that that help us to um, investigate our experience. The topic of attention is one of them, and I'd like to share some reflections on it this evening. The first thing comes to mind is that, well, this is an English word, and I'm speaking to you from the heart of the modern Theravada tradition, and we're rooted here at Empty Cloud and in general in monastic practice in the Theravada tradition in Pali, the language of the Buddhist sutras, the first wave of the Buddhist teachings, the discourses of the historical Buddha. And the concept of attention was kind of different. The term that we see in Pali in the suttas that's usually translated as attention is Manasikara. The difference between these two is interesting and I think illuminating. I'm going to be speaking about both attention and Manasikara. So let's start off by kind of looking at what that difference is. Attention is a word that shares its root with intention, extension, that tendere, I think, I'm not sure how you pronounce it, the Latin root means to stretch, to extend. When I think of attention and I think about how my mind moves, there's a sense of almost like the mind is a telescope that like it turns one way or the other and points, whether at something in my visual field or a sound or a smell or an idea or a thought. There's a feeling of directedness. In contrast, Manasikara, it has a very different root. When I realized what the root was, it really gave me pause at how profound the difference is. Manas is mind, just means mind. And kara, the ending, is the ending for, it means making or doing. So Manasikara, based on its etymology, means making in the mind. A more natural English way of putting that might be bringing to mind. The mind doesn't go after something or turn to something. Something comes into it, and in fact, it makes it. Whether it's a thought or a feeling or a perception, a thing that you're seeing. I'll leave my reflection at that for now, and we'll use these two concepts. We'll compare them to each other. We'll think about how they function and exploring how the mind directs itself in experience. Experience has a structure. When I say experience, I'm talking about each of us as individuals having a world that we make moment to moment. We experience through the 6 sense doors at any given moment. You can't stop it from happening other than by being unconscious. If you're awake and conscious, you're experiencing. And that experience is your reality. But experience has a structure when we really look at it. There's always a center, a thing that you are perceiving. Focus might be too strong a word. Sometimes it's focus is the right word, but there's a foreground. Whatever's in the foreground is what we consider to be at the center of our attention. And there's always a background, a kind of penumbra surrounding the foreground that we are also somewhat aware of, but in kind of a different way. We can move our attention between the foreground and the background. We can soften our gaze so that we're more aware of the background, but that structure is still there. And then there's the margin, the periphery. There may be some liminal area where we have some fading off of awareness. And outside of that circle, we're not conscious of what's happening. So that basic structure of attention describes what's on the, if you will, the other side. And this is, I don't know if you're tuned into Dhamma circles and Buddha discourse. This is a Buddhist discourse. I'm talking about the subject-object relationship. And whether or not there's a form of consciousness beyond that, well, maybe we'll get to that and talk about it a little bit. You can certainly ask questions about it. But this is our ordinary experience, that there's knowing and there's the knower. There's the knower and there's what is known, the seer and what is seen, and so forth through each of the sense doors. And attention, or Manasikara, points to that relationship. It's always there. When we can't really talk about mindfulness or consciousness without that structure. So why is this significant? Why is this worth paying attention to? Well, for me, it's because of this question, like, okay, well, I see that attention is focused, but what is it that causes the mind to have one focus over another, moment to moment? What's moving it forward? And there's an important clue to this rather important spiritual question, I think, in Western philosophy, in the school called phenomenology. You may have heard of which is actually kind of a meditative tradition in its way. Its central practice is, in fact, a form of contemplation. I'm only referring to it because I really like their language. They say that the structure of experience, the structure of attention is, and they use this word, intentional. That experience has an intentional structure. In other words, that every movement of the gaze is informed by intention. Every movement of the mind is informed by intention. What is intention? Well, from the Buddhist perspective, intention is kind of it's a point on a spectrum that begins with desire, wanting, not wanting, and continues through responding. Well, it begins actually with a feeling of wantable, not wantable, likable, not likable. And it continues through a reaction of desire and onwards to, okay, I want something here. I need something here. I'm going in this direction. And that sense of directedness, of intending, inclining, there's that tend again, that stretching, is at the heart of attention. That, at least, is the idea of the phenomenologist. But in my understanding, it's also true to my experience and to the description of that experience I find in the Dhamma. Just in the same way that the objects of the world move us one way or another if we're not aware of them, the objects of mind move us one way or another. They shift our attention. And if we're not conscious of them, they just go on and on and on. It's the wandering, it's samsara. Just like just like the samsara of the world that no doubt you've heard about if you've been spending any time in Buddhist circles. The Buddha teaches us that if we're heedless, if we don't pay attention, we can spend our entire life actually, lifetime after lifetime after lifetime, simply wandering from wanting to not wanting to wanting to not wanting. Each new desire comes in, whether it's a desire or its negative form, an aversion. A new object of desire comes in, and we follow it through, either to getting the object and tiring of the object and letting it go and moving on to a new object, or not getting it and feeling disappointed and giving up and moving on to another object, or wanting to get away from an object and succeeding or failing in that. But without awareness, there's nothing to break that momentum. It just goes on forever. So it is very important to us to pay attention to our attention, because attention is the mechanism whereby that process is made possible. Okay, so with these thoughts about attention in view, let's turn to how Manasikara, or attention, can be used in a skillful way to lead us out of that endless wandering of samsara. The heart of the Buddha's teaching is the Eightfold Path. You're probably familiar with it. It's the center of the Buddha's dispensation. The brilliant teaching that offers us a practical path forward in our development. The Eightfold Path breaks down into what's sometimes called threefold division, but you again may well have heard of it in your past encounters with the Dhamma. The threefold division of Sila, Samadhi, and Panya. Sila being virtue or morality, Samadhi being meditative practice in the form of mindfulness, and Samadhi, which gives it its name, the unification of mind. And finally, Panya, which is wisdom, discernment. These three divisions are simply a way of categorizing or of talking about and thinking about the Eightfold Path in a kind of a practical, thinking about it in a practical way that kind of works on the fly a little better than sorting through the 8 factors. I'll be going back and forth, but let's talk a little bit about each of them and see if we can't find some usefulness for reflecting on attention in the course of our life and our practice. So maybe starting with Sila, not because it is a first step that we need to get through and get beyond, but because it's the foundation of our spiritual lives. Sila in English is usually translated as morality, but it actually can be used either in a positive or negative sense. It can be translated simply to mean conduct. So there can be good Sila or bad Sila. I'd like to talk a little bit about both because the quality of attention that we bring to our thoughts and our words and our deeds, which is the domain of Sila, basically everything that we do, thoughts, words, and deeds. The quality of attention that we bring to it is what determines which way it goes, whether it's going to be good sila or bad sila. And the cultivation of sila pivots on attention. This is kind of an unusual way to put it, so I hope you'll bear with me and maybe reflect on whether or not there's anything to it. I'll say that again. The quality of our sila pivots on attention. If you want to cultivate sila, I'm suggesting, cultivate skillful attention. In Pali, this is called yoniso Manasikara. Yoniso is being translated, I'm translating here as skillful, but it's also translated as appropriate, or if you want to look at the root meanings of that word, with attention or attunement to the purpose or source of a thing. That'll be a little more concrete as I give you a few examples. But in the context of sila, all we really need to do is bring mindfulness to our attention to what we're doing. And good sila becomes much more likely as an outcome. That sounds kind of like a cliche or a bromide. All we need is mindfulness. But let's look at it a little more closely and see the truth that's to be found in that simple practice. I spoke not long ago, actually it was a little while ago, about the sutta in the Majjhima Nikaya, the middle-length discourses of the Buddha, where the Buddha gives advice to his son, who has become a monk, Rahula, on how to purify his conduct, how to develop good sila. And it's a beautiful sutta. I encourage you to look it up. The Buddha's advice to Rahula. The advice boils down to looking at whether or not the thing that you are about to do, so a thing that you haven't done yet, looking at whatever thing you're considering doing, is it beneficial to you, to others, to both, or is it detrimental? Asking yourself that simple question about things you're about to do. That's the first bit of advice he gives. And then he adds to it, also, Rahula, look at what you're doing and ask yourself, is the thing that I'm doing now beneficial to myself, to others, to myself and others, or is it detrimental? And Rahula, look at what you've done in the past. Reflect on it. Ask yourself, is it beneficial to myself, to others, to myself and others, or is it detrimental? With those three sets of instructions about the actions you're going to do, the actions you are doing, and the actions that you have done in the past, and describing each of those options specifically for your bodily actions, your words, or your spoken actions, and your thoughts, your mental actions. The Buddha has, in a pretty short sutta, actually covered all of the bases. That's all you have to do, is bring your awareness to what you've done, what you're doing, what you're going to do, asking, is this good or is this bad? And yet, that's quite a challenge. Our attention is a finite resource, and we do many, 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 many things. The task, when you really dig into it, if you look at it in that way, is considering each specific thought that comes to mind in that light, for every single action that you do. It doesn't really even seem like possible. Well, I would like to suggest a kind of a shortcut that you consider. Shortcut is maybe not giving this idea the respect that it deserves. But yeah, it gets a way to make that the advice that the Buddha just gave something quite practical. What's usually suggested when the difficulty of what I just mentioned is considered is the idea that, well, just do your best with it, stay with it. And I completely agree with this advice. Watch your actions, watch your speech, watch your thoughts. If you want to make it more manageable, become a monk and simplify your life to the point where you don't really do that much and your actions are already relatively harmless and you have a lot of time for quiet reflection. Then you can keep up with things much more easily. If becoming a monk is not the skillful thing for you to do at this point in your life, if that's not in the picture for you, well, you can still simplify your life quite a bit. Simplify your life as much as you can, and you'll be able to keep up with it better and discover the possibilities for Sila, which we'll get to in a moment. But I want to go a little bit farther than saying just do your best with this seemingly impossible task of reflecting on every action that you are going to do, are doing, or have done, to suggest that getting a feel for it, which is what's pointed to, actually has a very specific meaning. The advice is usually, well, you will get a feeling for it. It'll become instinctive. You won't have to think about whether every little thing is okay or not okay. You'll figure it out at the feeling level. And I think that is true. You do develop your conscience through practice. But the shortcut that I wanted to mention is ask yourself the question as you're reflecting on your conduct that we asked ourselves in meditation. Namely, what is the intention here? What is the intention behind my conduct? What is the desire? Why am I doing what I'm doing? At the level of intention. Directing your attention to your intentions in that way can make very, very clear whether an act that you're considering doing is skillful or unskillful. All right. Well, I would like to leave you with those thoughts on Sila and talk a little bit about the next of the threefold divisions, which is Samadhi. I know it's a topic of a lot of interest to members of our circle here at Empty Cloud, so I don't want to skip over it. The role of attention, Monasikara, in meditative practice, bhavana, is quite parallel to what I described in Sila. When we come to meditation, we can greatly benefit by forming a proper understanding of yoniso manasikara. I guess to get at this question, I'd like to ask you to consider with me a really basic question that it's good to keep coming back to, which is the question, well, what is Samadhi? What is it? This is a great question to just keep asking, not to settle for one pat answer, because Buddhist tradition has put forward different answers, and it's a deep question. It may be that the answer is one that will deepen and unfold for you only through the actual investigation, that you can't really understand or get to the heart of it without actually cultivating it, without developing it. Samadhi is usually translated, in many English sources at least, as concentration. I would just like to propose, let's toss that translation out the window. Concentration, at least for me as a kind of English language geek, is a word that brings to mind brows furrowed, tightening up the temples, trying really hard and getting the job done. that particular set of connotations is not going to really help you to develop samadhi, in my opinion or experience. So what does that leave us with if we're not going to go with the translation of concentration? Two common translations that we often come across are unification of mind and one-pointedness of mind. Those are both useful translations, but they point to very different understandings. And each of them, I think, is worth questioning. It occurred to me as I was delving into this subject myself, which is something, if you take the path up seriously, it's going to become really interesting to you. It may already be, in which case I hope you'll find this interesting. And if not, I hope you'll just keep it in the back of your mind as you learn how to meditate and develop your practice. I bet it will be interesting at some point. What happens when the mind really gets in tune during meditation? The definition one-pointedness suggests that, and as it's often defined, suggests that all of the mental resources come to bear on one object, typically thought of or defined as the object of meditation, so that there's nothing else, there's no distraction from the object. No distraction is the defining feature of samadhi. But what is it that we're not distracted from? In the idea of one-pointedness, what we're not distracted from is the meditation object, whether it's your breath or whether it's a beautiful quality like metta, whether it's a kasina sign, something that you're visualizing. The idea is that's all that you're aware of. But it occurred to me, there's actually something kind of not quite right about that, and it has to do with attention. Namely, you can't really have an object without a background. There is no foreground without a background, at least as I think about it. So you can't really have just one point of focus. It's not a point. There's some richness there. You're zoomed in, but you can't zoom to a single point or there's no object. So that kind of perplexed me, and I thought, well, so that can't quite be it. I'll throw in as a side note, and I won't really get to expand on this evening, but a related reflection that I found helpful in my own meditation is that it actually turns out that there is no correct setting on the zoom lens, if you will, of attention. Some meditation teachers will encourage you to zoom in, really narrow down. Others will say, well, zoom out, get a really expansive, big view. Actually, both of those can be useful. There's no correct setting on the zoom lens of attention. Okay, so the other option, the other translation that you'll often come across is of samadhi, is unification of mind. The mind becomes very still and undistracted. Whatever passes through it, it is an open field wherein objects come and go, and it is unperturbed. So there's also a lot of truth to this definition, I think. Objects come, the mind knows them, and things move through to be known as things, but the mind is unperturbed. Well, yes, but that precludes attention in a way, because in a sense, that's what happens in ordinary experience, at least if we think of attention as Manasikara. Objects come, objects go. So it's not just that the mind is still and objects come and go, because that's simply a definition of experience. There's a missing ingredient there in that understanding of samadhi as unification. And I would like to suggest that the missing ingredient that it also helps to reflect on, and it's not that that definition is wrong, it's that there's an extra little bit there that we need to, I think, consider. It's that with attention, the mind is always intending. And in samadhi, when the mind is unified, there's only one steady intention. So distraction, when we jump from object to object that comes through the mind, entails a shifting of intention. We're chasing after, whether in a gross way or in some very, very subtle way, whatever that object is, chasing after it or fleeing from it. But when the mind is unified, there's only one intention. All of the resources of mind are brought to bear on that one intention, so that objects that come through are not distracting the mind from that intention. The mind is not changing intentions as objects come through. So this leaves us with the last big question that I'll ask, because I want to leave time for your questions. And that is, well, what is the intention of the mind in samadhi? And here, I think we need to go to the suttas and look at what we're being invited to cultivate. There is a list, a standard list of Buddha in the teachings. One of the great lists, like the Four Noble Truths or the Eightfold Noble Path, a standard list that is not that often discussed, or not as often as those other ones, but I think quite important on this very topic. It's a list of 4 items called the Pada, the roads to power, in one translation that I especially like. And the 4 roads to power are aspects of samadhi. That concentration, that translation, by the way, is the one you'll find in the most popular translation of the Digha Nikaya, the Long Discourses of the Buddha, by Maurice Walsh. The roads to power are each concentrations in his translation. That's not my favorite part of the translation, but they are the road to power that is the concentration of intention, which is what I'm focusing on as the center of it. The road to power, which is the concentration of energy. The road to power, which is the concentration of consciousness. And the road to power, which is the concentration of investigation. My understanding is that together, these are aspects of samadhi. That there is the intention to bring forward the most wholesome states. As samadhi deepens, the states of rapture and happiness, and deepening into tranquility, deepening into mindfulness and equanimity. Those are the intentions of mind. The mind is unified around those intentions with energy and with consciousness, with mindfulness, full awareness, and enabled thereby to investigate. So the roads to power, I always found that a very kind of mysterious and intriguing list in my early encounters with the Dhamma. But as my own practice deepened, I came to see them as descriptions of what we're cultivating in samadhi. So I hope that'll be useful for you. Maybe as just a final thought, I'll say just a little bit about attention in panya, in wisdom, the fruit of our practice and our spiritual development, what we're trying to develop and cultivate. Panya is often translated as wisdom. Discernment is a good translation. My personal favorite is intelligence, creative, skillful intelligence. The the fruit of all of this cultivation of virtue and our faculties of mind that constitute the path. So the fruition in Panya that we come to also deeply involves attention. I'll just say a few things about it. Maybe here we want to focus on the Pali term Manasikara, because when we get to the point of really discerning what's going on in our experience, we see that actually, well, maybe I'm able to close the circle here and point to my original question about what is it that moves the mind. We see that, well, as Ajahn Chah puts it, the mind doesn't actually move. When you see it clearly, you see that the mind does not actually move. The mind doesn't actually stay still either. Stillness and motion arise in the mind. The mind makes stillness and motion. So attention is not a movement. The objects of mind do not appear in the stillness. The mind makes stillness or movement, peace or agitation. This way of thinking about attention, I think, helps us to start to get a feeling for that refrain that we come to in the Buddha's discourses again and again and again, that points to and captures the realization that tips a bhikkhu into becoming an arahant, the breakthrough realization that all that arises passes away. It's kind of a formula. You come to it again and again and again. We're in that territory in thinking about attention in the context of wisdom. All that arises passes away. Well, maybe I'll leave it at that, at those reflections. Invite you to dwell on that. All that arises passes away in your own practice. See if you can come to some sense for yourself of the truth of that understanding. I offer these words for your reflection. And I wonder if you have any questions. Feel free to type them in. Just a bunch of hellos here. Any questions? Let's see. Ron is with us this evening, and Elaine. Hello. AP, welcome. Michael, hello. Here's a question. Could attention be described as a focusing of awareness? Sure, absolutely. And I think that's a more useful way of thinking about it than the telescope kind of analogy I gave before, which it's easy to slip into the inside-outside self-view of like an I who is the subject. There's always going to be a distinction of perspective. On one side, the known, the thing that is known, and on the other side, the knowing of the thing. But through the practice, we learn to release identifying with the knowing, the I. So yeah, focusing of awareness. Sure. Okay, we don't have a lot of questions in the live chat. I will invite our residents who are here with me at Empty Cloud, listening to the Dhamma reflections, to invite to ask any questions that you might have. I'll give our online community a few minutes as well. And if there are no questions, we can end a little bit early. Yes, a question. No question.
No, thank you for the talk. There's a lot to reflect upon. It's a beautiful talk.
You're very welcome.
Beautiful words.
Okay. Well, why don't we end there with 3 sadhus, and we can call it a slightly early evening. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. And we'll be back tomorrow morning for those in our online community at 8 a.m. for sutta study. And tomorrow evening again for a meditation program at 7:30 and a Dhamma talk at about 8. And then one more day, Friday, Dhamma, we'll have the sutta study in the morning at 8 a.m. on Friday. And then in the evening, we will have monk chat. So if you have general questions about monastics, monastic life, anything related to bhikkhus or bhikkhunis, male or female monks, you can come on Friday evening with those. We'll hope to see you there or then in our virtual space. And until then, I wish you a good morning, evening, or night, wherever you happen to be.